All right, guys. So this is going to be a short video that just goes over the basic instructions for this activity, kind of the basics of what we've got going on and how you can accomplish this. And then at the end of the video, I'll read the text in case it helps you understand the text to have it read to you. So when you're looking on your screen, you should see a video and this blank area right here on the page. It's this video I'm creating now, so I couldn't put it there yet. But this activity is pretty simple. What we're looking at is we're looking at Napoleon Bonaparte. And what we're trying to discover today is Napoleon the good guy or is he the bad guy? When it comes to the French Revolution, he kind of takes over and he brings a lot of good to the French people, but he also brings some bad. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at two different points of view or two different perspectives, two different arguments about Napoleon, and we're going to try to determine what we believe to be historically accurate. Should he be remembered as the savior of the revolution, someone who came into a messy situation and saved it from the violence, saved it from the problems, saved it from the suffering? Or is he someone who came into the revolution, took advantage of a chaotic situation to get power for himself? That he just used the revolution to become the dictator of France so that he could have power? So that's what we're looking at here. There's going to be a couple of questions for us to answer, but there's really going to be two different things that we do. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to read this document here. Okay. So this document is titled Napoleon, the Savior of the Revolution. So in this document, the author is going to argue that Napoleon should be considered the savior of the French Revolution. All right. So what we are going to do is we're going to go into this article, and anywhere we find evidence that Napoleon was the savior or Napoleon was the good guy, Napoleon brought about the change the French people wanted, we're going to highlight it in yellow. Once we're done with that, we're going to scroll down to the next one, and this one's called Napoleon, Dictator of France. So in this article, the author is going to argue that Napoleon was the dictator, the bad guy. He took power for himself and just took advantage of the situation. So in this article, anywhere we find evidence that Napoleon is the bad guy or Napoleon is the dictator, we're going to highlight it in green. Once that's finished, you'll answer the questions on the side. All right. So I'm going to show you an example of how we can highlight this. I'm going to do the first paragraph in each with you, and then I'll go over some of the questions. All right, so up here at the top, you should see where I'm highlighting. So that's how you can highlight in yellow. Oops, didn't mean to do that. Unhighlight that. Oops, here I'm screwing it up. All right, so let's read this first paragraph. So first paragraph says, Napoleon Bonaparte was considered by many to be the savior of the French Revolution by ending it and putting in place a government that brought equality and stability to a torn country. So I am going to choose to highlight that he put in place a government that brought equality and stability to a torn country. That's a good thing. All right, he came in and he saved it. There was problems going on, but he brought in equality and he saved this revolution. The French Revolution was actually a series of wars that would fail because the government put in place after the fighting would fail. The most notorious was the Jacobins, whose reign of terror created great upheaval in France. Napoleon instead united France. I'm going to highlight that, uniting France. That sounds like a good thing. No longer would jobs be given to those merely because of social status. So he says you don't get your jobs based on your social status, you get jobs based on what you can do. That sounds like equality to me, so we're going to highlight that as a good thing. The French under Napoleon would become united, strong, and most important, equal. That seems worth highlighting as well. That sounds like a good thing he brought, a way that he saved the revolution. Napoleon brought stability and direction to a country without course. He brought stability and direction. His unification of France would have a big impact not only on Europe, but the entire world. Now, once you do this for the entire document, you should see highlighted all of the good things Napoleon did. So here, if we go back to our highlighted, we just see he put in place a government that brought equality and stability. He united France. No longer jobs given to those merely because of social status. Napoleon brought France to be united, strong, most important, equal. He brought stability and direction. So you're highlighting the evidence that this guy is pointing to say, hey, these are the reasons why Napoleon was the good guy. Now, Let's scroll down and do this for the Dictator of France portion. So remember, in this one, we want to highlight in green. So let me change the color there. And we're looking for any evidence that Napoleon was the dictator or the bad guy. Dictator is a term that just means someone who takes all the power for themselves. So someone who takes all the power for themselves is a dictator. So let's read this paragraph together. This author writes, the word dictator refers to a person who has absolute power, especially a ruler who has absolute unrestricted control in a government. This definition proves that Napoleon was definitely a dictator as he took power for himself. Highlight that. However, there were dictatorship characteristics that Napoleon did not enforce so strictly, or even ideas of freedom which he allowed, such as religious freedom. Now, you don't have to do this, but that looks like a good thing, allowing religious freedom. So I'm going to highlight this in yellow. I know that yellow goes with the other document, but I just want to point out that there are some of the good things Napoleon did. Let me go back to green now. After Napoleon finally brought peace in Europe in 1802, he started on leaving his mark internally in France. One of the first internal affairs was his life consulship. He declared himself leader of France for the rest of his life, leaving him with absolute power in France, and no one could challenge him as life consul. That sounds like a dictator, someone who says they are in charge for the rest of their life and they have absolute power. Sounds like a dictator. Then he furthers his position as dictator by having the right to nominate his successor. So he gets to choose whoever comes after him, which would leave an unelected leader, also known as a dictator, and also proves that Napoleon was unchallenged in France. This takes away the idea of the people of France being able to elect their own leader that appeared in the Declaration of the Rights of Man and the Citizen. After centralizing power, he sets about strengthening his own power. I'm going to highlight that. So as you continue to read this article, what you will do is you will highlight in green any evidence that suggests Napoleon is the dictator. Now, once you're done with that, you're going to come over and answer the questions. All right, so we have a very specific question right here. How did Napoleon fix the problems of the Third Estate faced at the start of the Revolution? What was the number one thing the French people suffered with at the start? I told you this day one that I wanted you to associate with the French Revolution. And that word is equality. Okay, the number one problem of the French people was equality. All right, so does Napoleon bring equality or does he not? So how does Napoleon fix the problems of the Third Estate? Does he? Does he bring more equality? They face financial problems. Does he help them get more food? Does he help their financial situation? Those are the things you need to look at here. Then the second question is just to write a summary of Napoleon's accomplishments according to this author. You should have a whole lot of things highlighted, so just write a quick summary of Napoleon's accomplishments. Now down here we've got three questions. How did Napoleon fail to fix the problems the Third Estate faced? So how did Napoleon not bring equality? How did he not help them financially? How did he not do some of those things that might have needed to happen? Once again, we're just writing a summary of what Napoleon did to act like a dictator according to this author. So use the green stuff you highlighted to summarize the ways Napoleon acted like a dictator. Now this is the big question, the culminating task. In a paragraph and using evidence from the text, argue whether Napoleon was the savior or the dictator of France. So now it's your turn to determine. You've read an article from someone who believes he was the savior. You've read an article from someone who believes he was the dictator. You've highlighted the evidence that both of them bring to the table. Now you decide and use evidence from both texts if you want to, but was Napoleon the good guy or the bad guy? Is he the hero or is he the villain? Is he the savior of the revolution or is he the dictator? In a paragraph, you will explain your answer right here. And you will just very simply start out with Napoleon was the savior of the revolution because you can just do that and then explain yourself in the next few paragraphs. Or Napoleon was the, if I could get right, everything to work. Well, it doesn't seem like it's letting me type. But you could just simply write Napoleon was the dictator of the revolution because, and then explain. So I hope this is helpful. I hope this is helpful instruction for you.